and let Nancy take it away.
Okay, welcome back, friends. I hope you had a good weekend and started the week off well. So we're going to start with round 3 of a 2-part training, but whatever. We ran out of time, so here we go. When I last left you, we had been through the matrix and we had started going through levels 1, 2, and we were finishing up on 3. And I'm going to finish up on 3 with just saying that there's where we start talking about, we've been talking a little bit about touch cues. Now we're going to bring in object cues into this. And we're going to talk about the cues versus a symbol. And a cue, when we think about a cue, and I'm going to put my screen down like that so that I can now see my full screen. When we think about an object or a touch cue, then that is a form of receptive communication, okay? So it's produced by the partner to let the individual know what's going to happen next or what is expected. So it's really to convey that message to them of what's going on. And that's either done through a touch cue or through an object cue. And then a symbol is where we take that object cue and we use it, the individual then starts using it as an expressive communication device. So they're using it in that way. So before, when it's receptive, it's an object cue or a touch cue. And when it's used expressively, it's then becomes a symbol, and that goes into like 5 and 6, levels 5 and 6. And remember, we're still in level 3 here. So we're using them as cues right now. So then that brings us to our cue dictionary. And when we do that, then that simply means that we're going to take that touch cue or that object cue, and what is it used to communicate? What meaning? What's used to communicate this meaning? So what are we using? Are we using our fingers, 2 fingers on our belly to show we're changing the diaper? What will my partner do? So what I will do is say change diaper, and what's expected from me, which is the individual. And so we have to think that through. So what is the touch cue? What's the meaning or the object cue? And what will we do to help them? And then what do we expect from them? And if we have that all lined out and posted where people can do it, then it's also that shared communication that we're going for. So that's what you would do in level 3. Now remember, we're going up. So in level 1, we're talking about that receptive communication development. And in level 1, it's just in an awareness level. And then in level 2, it's getting them to that anticipation level. And then when we're in levels 3 and 4, we're trying to get them to recognize. We want them to attend to others' communication and respond to their behaviors or their intents. Okay, so now we're up to level 4. And I wanted just to stop with that level 3, just enough to let you know that, yes, that cue dictionary, where we started it with those response dictionary, and then we're getting into the cue dictionary. So every time we always want to compile those, the language that they know, the communication that they know, and how they know it. And we really want to tease that out so that everybody on the team knows what it is and knows how to do all of those different cues in case that they have to do it with the individual. So now we're at level 4, and this typically happens between 12 and 18 months. And it's where we really do get to intentional communication, and it's conventional now. See, in level 3, it was not conventional. So they may take us and tug and pull us to a place or take us wherever. But now at level 4, we're getting to where they're really starting to use some conventional gestures, and they're used with intent of affecting the observer's behavior. So they're really using these in a more conventional way, where people are really starting to identify and understand what those gestures mean. They're more typically where socially we all understand those. So these are more conventional and or either gestures or vocalizations. And these are still pre-symbolic, so we're not using them yet. They're still pre-symbolic and will remain that way until we get more into level 5 and such. Okay, so with those conventional communication, then it's pre-symbolic. Now we want to say pre, that means instead of non. A lot of times you'll hear non-symbolic, and when you hear non-symbolic, then that really kind of makes people think that it's never going to happen. With pre-symbolic, it means, yeah, it's before we get to where they know symbols and understand symbols. But that doesn't mean that we're shutting it off and saying it's not going to happen. Okay, so pre-symbolic, because they don't involve any sort of symbol, still, we're just using those gestures, those conventional gestures and such. We're shaping that. And I know I said that, shaping that behavior, the other day. And what I mean by that is the kid does some gesture that's not really the appropriate way or what people would really understand that to be. We're going to catch them in that moment of doing that and letting them know, I understand what you're saying. You want this to be whatever, but I'm going to help you to figure out how to shape your hands or how to get it in a more socially acceptable way. So you're shaping that behavior. You're helping them to understand this is the way that it's going to get you much more action. If you do it this way, then people are going to understand and they're going to be more receptive to you. So that conventional means that because they are socially acceptable, we'll continue to use them and accompany them with our language as we mature. So that's what we're really aiming for with kids. The meaning of some of these symbols may be unique to the culture, so it depends on where they are, and you know, it's like when you see folks from France, they'll kiss on both sides of the cheek. So culturally, some things may happen in some places that they don't in others, and you have to be respectful of that if you understand and know the culture of your student, of your person.
Hey, Nancy.
Yes.
There was a question that, would that be like when a child says ba and the communication partner reinforces it as ball or something related to the activity?
Yes, that's exactly how it would be. Yes. Because what you're doing is kind of correcting and shaping it. Yes, you know, at a long time we will say if they go ba, and we will accept that as ball. But now we're getting into a little more conventional, and we have higher expectations. And as we raise those bars, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to let you have it if you don't give me ball with the L's, but it certainly wants you to attempt it and try to get it to a little more acceptable. And we're going to continue to do that as we move them up the levels. Now, in level 4, here's something that's really that we need to think about is with conventional gestures, such as like pointing, with kids with vision loss, they may not be using some of those gestures like pointing at something because they don't see it. So that wouldn't make sense for them to be pointing at those things. So some of those may not happen. Some of those intents may not happen with a child with visual impairment just because of that. Okay, so what are the 9 category behaviors? As you see, we're starting to bring in more and more. So we've got those, they're still gonna use body movements, early sounds, facial expressions, visual. They're going to start those simple gestures, and now they're getting into more conventional gestures and vocalizations. So we really are moving up that scale and getting more and more of those behaviors going on. Okay, so the behaviors are intentional and they're purposely directed towards another person with meaning. So they really intend for them to do something or know something or whatever, and requires that dual orientation of both the communication partner and the topic. So if the topic is food and the communication partner, they put it down in front of them and they might look at it and look back up like, I don't like that. So those levels, or they may extend a box of crackers, but they're not necessarily using that box of crackers as a symbol. They're using it more of they might like more some of it, but they haven't gotten to that symbol yet. They're not quite there, but they're starting to get there. So some of the modes that they might use are pointing or nodding or shaking. They might use that alternate gaze where they look at it, they look at you, and then they look back at it as if to say, boy, I really would love to have that cookie that's sitting there. Would you get it for me? And then sometimes open palm, they may kiss or hug, extend an object. But remember, it's still not being used as a symbol at this point. They're just extending that or pushing it away. So, or as if to say, I want that. They may wave or raise their hands or some kind of vocal intonation. So see, as it's starting to build out, and we're getting more and more going on. Okay, so remember, our intentionality began at level 3, and we're still building it up. And the communicative attempts began to overlap within the higher levels of the matrix. So we're still wanting those intents to happen, but but what we want is a little higher expectation now. So the conventional use increases. Now we're really starting to get a little more complex and we're expecting more. So the complexity of those behaviors start to increase, but the intents stay the same. Okay. So like with levels 3, they'll still be using these same intents. But now, as you see, we want them using the same ones as 1, 2, and 3, like they have been. But now we're getting them into 4, where they start to greet people and offer things or direct someone's attention to something, using more formal, more socially polite forms of things, and maybe begin to answer some yes/no questions, and maybe even ask questions in their own way. So as you see, these intents are still there. They're just getting more complex as we're going up. Excuse me. Once again, we're going to start that AAC. It starts at level 3, and we're just introducing it. And now in level 4, we're also going to be introducing, but we're going to be using more things. We're going to be thinking more along, whereas in level 3, it may have been just a simple call switch. Now we're going to be thinking about, we're still going to be thinking about the switch placement and positioning. We're going to be thinking about our learner and their range of motion and can they get it? We're also going to be looking at their vision and hearing. But we can start using some of the AAC devices in a little different way. Instead of just a single switch, a call output switch, they might be having other things just to expose them to some more tangible symbols or some eye gaze boards, object choice boards, switches for yes or no, or acceptance and rejection. So we're really starting to use more and more AAC devices here. We also want to teach one-on-one correspondence between the symbols, that concrete and abstract, and the reference. We're going to shape those unconventional gestures, like I said before. We're going to teach those gestures across all those intents. So we're really going to be starting to think about the refuse and obtain, social, and information. So the first time, that's when information is starting to come in at this level. So we're going to start really looking at all the intents and starting to pull more of those intents in. And we're going to transition from conventional gestures to starting to symbols. So once again, that receptive piece has to come in before we can ever expect it receptively. So we're going to start with those symbols and such in this level, but we're really not expecting them to be using them as much to give back to us. At this point, they're using it to receive. Now, you also need to remember at this level, some individuals have to be exposed to and learn the movement necessary to respond. So it's not just a matter of the symbol and learning the symbol, but how do I move my body to get to that symbol or to get to do what I need it to do. So, and sometimes that is hard for especially our guys with limited mobility, or sometimes it's just a matter of having them really get it all together so that they can get their body adjusted and ready and physically move their arm to press a button or to touch the symbol. So really they have to learn that movement, and that's sometimes a hard thing for them to get everything going at the same time. Okay, so the physical access to symbols must be established. That's where we really let them have access to it. And they have to learn to touch it, to look at it, to reach towards it, point to it, whatever they need to do. Then they need to learn how to do that as much as recognize the symbol and that it represents something. And the intentional communication acts are more likely to occur in the context of something highly motivating for them, and when they're in close proximity to the communication and the communication partner is responsive. So in this, you got to be on your game. You got to make sure that the stuff is there, that they can reach it, and that it's also in something that they really like to do to get them to really be motivated to do it. And as those symbols are introduced, remember to be responsive of all the gestures and symbols. So you really have to let them know, I understand you, I see what you're trying to tell me, here's how you do it to make it better, you know, that kind of thing. And then remember, we're always going to use our speech and we're going to model along. I use my speech as much, even with deaf kids, I use my speech as much to slow me down and to help me keep my pace and my tone. I want to keep what I call the rhythm of the child. So if it's a child that's more slow in acting and really needs some time to get their body together and stuff, then I'm going to slow my impact out, you know, when I'm doing things with them so that they're able to really be able to stay with me. I'm staying with them. And I'm letting them drive that timing of it, the pacing of it. But I'm also going to slow down my verbiage too. I may not use all the sentences and stuff that I'm doing with you all. I may only do it with a couple of key words, like what it is and maybe an action that we're going to do. Those things. Okay, so some of the effective intervention should include experiences that involve movement and action. You know, that really is motivating for a lot of kids. And I remember one kid that I used to teach, we would do a lot of cooking. And this kid was in a wheelchair. He's very, he had a hard time getting his body moving and stuff. But what we would do with him is when we had something that we had to put in the oven, we would make sure that he got to kick the oven door shut. So we would have, you know, whoever was preparing the food, then we get ready to put it in. And it was like, okay, John, we're going to unstrap your foot. Are you ready? And boy, he was right there on everybody's move. Couldn't wait for his time, that he knew it was his time to kick that oven door shut. And we were going to cook whatever it was we were cooking. So it was very highly motivating for him. And it helped him to become a part of the cooking scenario when he wasn't able to do a lot of the other things. We wanted multisensory exploration, including touch. So we want to make sure that we involve as much of that as possible, because if you think about it, when you're hands-on, when you're learning something and you're actually doing it, it stays with you a lot more than if I just tell you about it and then you go try to do it yourself. Kids are the same way. So why wouldn't we? And we definitely want to include touch, especially with our learners that are deafblind. We want them to have opportunities to access the symbols, to have access to the symbols. We want them to be able to touch them often and to be able to refer back to it. We also want the interaction with the activities or the objects that are highly preferred by the individual, not necessarily by us, but by them. And sometimes that's hard to find, but that's how you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And then interaction should occur during play, just having fun with it. Sometimes it's that kind of exploration and that just playing around, that's when you're going to get your best interventions. And then implement it in those regular routines, really identify those and be that highly responsive adult also. The more that you're highly responsive and you're really letting the individual know that you're a communication partner, it makes all the difference in the world. So then when we're establishing, this is, establishing routines, I think. I can't see my top part, but it's with those conventional gestures. So we're going to replace those unconventional behaviors with conventional ones in existing routines. So maybe as we're doing those routines now, we really want them to start putting in more of those conventional gestures than what we have been in the past. In the past, like we were being able to say just that bah instead of ball. Now, I really want you to give me more of the sign, more of the whatever, that you really are intentional in your communication and you're doing it the right way so that everybody will understand. So those behaviors may be waving or nodding or some kind of gaze or to point or give me, show me, whatever. And my response should be appropriate according to their intent. So whatever their intent is, I should have that response that's going to help them. And this is something that's going to happen with the individual, with the partner, and within the environment. So our outcome should be that they learn to communicate in that more socially acceptable manner. So that's new level 4 intents are demonstrated. So that's that greet and the offer and those polite social forms, and maybe even asking or answering questions. So we really are trying to up that ante on them.
Nancy?
Yes.
Quick question again, and I'm just seeing this. It might be going back to when you were talking about using multiple modalities, speech, while you're signing, all of that thing. So the question is, how do you accommodate students who have difficulty integrating multisensory modes?
I think that you take your time and you really explore with them. And sometimes it takes, and those that can't, then you stick with the modality that they can. But if you can, it's like with us. Think about how you can use many more, as much information as you can to really understand something. But if that's too much for the individual, you have to look at, it has to be an individual decision. If they can only do that one modality, then I'm going to stop everything else and do that. I might, once they're really engaged in it and they really know it and they understand it, which that should happen as you're doing those routines, then I might start bringing in a couple of other modalities as we're doing that. But I want to make sure that they know that routine first and that they understand through that one modality that they use right now. And then I'm going to start opening it up and adding more. Does that make sense? Did that answer it?
Hopefully.
Okay.
I'll let you know if we hear back.
Okay. All right. Thanks for letting me know, because I can't see the chat pod. All right. So here's where we would start using those anticipation calendars. And that's just a real entry level timepiece. And it's for the here and now. We're going to be whatever it is. And usually when I do anticipation calendars, that's when I want them to know what's going to happen next. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to teach them that the concepts of the immediate future and the immediate past. This is the here and now, is where we're going to use that anticipation calendar. I'm going to show you the object or let you feel the object or whatever, and then we're going to do that. So that lets them know what we're going to do next. And that really helps kids so much to know what's going to happen next. I mean, you think about your own self and how it really, you knew you were going to sign on today. You're going to listen to me talk for a while. You may ask a question or something, but nothing out of the ordinary is going to happen. You are prepared for what we're doing because we already let you know what we were going to talk about today. But a lot of times our kids, even though people say, oh, he knows the schedule, oh, he knows what's going to happen next, we don't know that they really do know that. And it really, I've seen it help kids so much to let them know, first, we're doing this. That just like if you're looking at your own calendar and see, I have a dentist appointment today. Well, I may not love going to the dentist, but at least I can psychologically, physically, emotionally get myself prepared. And that's pretty much what we're doing here. Even if it is, sorry, even if it's something that I don't prefer to do, at least I know what's going to happen next. And it helps me also to put a label on those events. It gives it a name, you know, instead of, well, of course, we know what it is. We've been doing this every day for 5 years now, but we haven't necessarily given our students the name of what it is we're doing. And that's where these anticipation calendars and labeling what it is we're going to do next helps so much. So prerequisites to this is they need to be able to recognize some people, locations, sounds, scents, actions that are associated with a few routines. They don't have to know every routine inside and out, just a few routines, but they do need to know and understand those. Then we're going to use 1 or 2 objects that are familiar within that routine. And then we're going to anticipate a few steps while doing that familiar routine. And that's indicating that memory. And so maybe as they're doing this, then I may slow my roll a little bit and wait for them and see if I see them anticipating that next step. They may lean forward to do something. You know, if I'm feeding them or about to get them out of their chair or whatever, they may lean a little bit or help me. That lets me know they are anticipating. That's a huge skill that kids need to learn and do. Okay, so this is now we're into level 5. And you need to remember that I'm giving you the Reader's Digest condensed version of all of this stuff. And that each one of these modules that we're creating has, you know, lots and lots and lots of different strategies and stuff. I'm just giving you some snapshots of kind of the progression and some of the things that we've put into this. Okay, so we're up to level 5 now. And this typically happens between 12 and 24 months. And it's in conjunction with those gestures and words. So they're still going to be using those gestures. They may be even using a few words here and there, but now we're going to start getting that symbolic communication. And those symbols represent or stand for something else. So a symbol, you know, if you think about the written word, all of those symbols of the alphabet all form together to put the printed word. So they're all symbols, right? And there's symbols that represent that specific referent with one-on-one correlation. So these are concrete symbols, and they physically represent what they resemble what they represent. Now, when we do the concrete symbols, they can include pictures, which they can be either actual photographs or pictures that look realistic or close resemblance to an item. They could be objects, or you may use an actual shoe, or you may use a shoelace that represents a shoe. They could be iconic gestures that, such as patting a chair to say sit down, or sounds like bzz, like a bee. So we're starting to get into those symbols. And then we get into tangible symbols. And tangible symbols are those things that we can touch, that they can feel, and they represent things. So a symbol system, or a communication symbol, that includes those 3D symbols, those objects, or two-dimensional symbols, which are the photographs or the line drawing things like the PEC symbol system or the Mayer Johnson stuff, to support communication and language development. So we're going to provide that receptive and expressive means of communication. So now, see, we're getting into both receptive and expressive, and it allows them to refer to people, objects, places, and events beyond the here and now. We were in that here and now, that anticipation, and here it is, and we're going to do it. Now we can use these symbol systems, and it can represent, like I might have a ball that would represent we're going to the gym or something like that. Then it fits, you know, we need to make sure to fit it with their sensory and cognitive abilities and experiences, their prior experiences. So you might be able to use a toy bus to represent time going home, but with a learner with no vision, then we definitely wouldn't want to do that. We'd want to use something with some texture or something that they might feel. So a lot of times when it representing the bus, I might use like some texture that feels like the seat on the bus. Or if there are seat belts, I might use a strap of the seat belt to let them know that that's where we're going to the bus. I wouldn't necessarily use at all those miniatures, because for a child who's blind, they wouldn't have any association with that. So I really want to think in terms of what do they feel? What is it they experience, or what is they feel? I had a student, my deafblind student, who used to go with her intervener in her car, and they would go back and forth to her house. But on Fridays, we would go in my car, community-based, and we wanted instruction. So we wanted to have something that differentiated her car with my car. And with my car, we pulled apart a toy that had like the little toggle switch, because that was like the window switch that she liked to play with in my car, that had the windows go up and down. So we found a little toggle switch that was like that represented going in my car to go community-based. We also used other items like a fanny pack that had her tangible symbols in it to let her know where we were going and what we were going to be doing. Okay, so tangible symbols can be both a mode of communication and or a systematic instructional approach. So I'm going to use it in both ways. Sorry, my allergies are killing me today. Tangible symbols are useful means of communication for individuals who don't have abstract representation. So this is more of a concrete representation that helps. Plus, they serve as a bridge to other symbol systems. So I might use those in order to teach them then things like more abstract things like sign or printed word or braille. So I'm going to use the tangible symbol, but I'm also going to teach those other things after they get the tangible symbol down pretty well. And it does not interfere with the acquisition of speech or signs or any other abstract symbol system. It's just, for me, it's kind of that concrete feeling, and that some way that they can really understand, oh, this means this activity that we're going to do. Oh, and it has a name, and here's the printed word or the brailled word. So I'm going to do that also. But first, I'm going to use just the tangible symbols. It's level 5 is a transitional step, and a lot of times individuals will skip level 5. Level 5 is that concrete symbols that will make sense. So it's that real concrete. And then level 6 is abstract. And some kids skip right from level 4 straight into level 6, and they don't do 5, because once they get into there, they really get it. And so they're really starting to move from pre-symbolic to symbolic. So this is level 5 is just that transitional step. It's beginning at this level that we really have all those intents are assessed. So all of them, the refuse, obtain, social, and information. Then we also need to think about concepts. And remember, we talk about those all throughout. In every one of the levels, we want to think about those concepts, because concepts are so vital to our individuals. And we don't teach that way. We teach more about skills than we do about concepts. But we really, and especially our learners that are blind, they don't hit all those concepts that we learn without anyone teaching us. So we want to make sure that we're really thinking about the concepts and how we connect those concepts. And concepts are formed through experience. So we want to make sure that we're really giving them those concepts that help us to develop, meaning behind things, and really provide that foundation for communication and literacy. And it also is just how we organize information. So that's why it's really important that we have all of those things. Then we want to look at the vocabulary being taught and think about how to group the tangible symbols into conceptual categories. So we really are thinking about those core vocabulary versus that personal vocabulary. So once again, when we think about concepts, we're going into those concrete and the semi-concrete concepts at this point. We're not getting so much into those abstract concepts that we talked about before. But at concrete are those things that we can touch, smell, feel. And then those semi-concretes are those more actions or colors, positions, things that we can demonstrate, but they don't stay with us, like jumping or things like that. So we really haven't gotten into those abstract concepts yet because they're not ready. So now we're getting into all those gestures, and we're still using all of those behaviors, but we're adding in those concrete symbols now at level 5. And remember, those behaviors are intentional, and they're purposefully directed towards that partner with that meaning, with the intended meaning. And they're symbolic with concrete symbols only. We really are only focusing on those right now. We're going to be exposing them to some of the abstract, but we really are wanting them to recognize and start using. We don't want to put a lot of multiple meanings in yet. And we don't want, we can have the abstract, but we're not necessarily going to think that they're going to use them. Remember how at level 4, they might extend that box of crackers? Well, this time we're going to mount something with that cracker, a symbol for cracker. It might be a piece of that box that we've mounted to make it a symbol. When it's mounted, it's a symbol. When it's by itself, it's not. So there's the difference. And then those modes, they may be mimicking sounds of objects. We're hoping to get some of those gestures going on. And we may pantomime some of those actions. We're going to use those tangible symbols. We may use the whole object. We may use partial objects. So with a cup, I may use the whole cup. I may use just the handle of the cup. We may use textures, realistic pictures. I may use photos or single color pictures so that it's only that thing, or a piece of a familiar package, such as like a cracker or such. Or we may start with line drawings. And then those AT devices with 2 or 3 dimensional concrete object symbols. So we're going to start using those things and see how it's starting to progress more. So our overarching goals, we're going to teach that correspondence between the concrete symbols and the reference. We're going to teach those conventional gestures like we have. Now we're going to expand the vocabulary, and we're modeling the sequencing of things, how we say things, how things are supposed to be done. And then we're going to start transitioning to more abstract levels. So we may, instead of using objects, we're going to try pairing it with pictures and seeing if they can do just the pictures without the objects. We may use concrete pictures, and then maybe going into more of the abstract or multi-meaning pictures. Or we may use from gestures, we may be starting to go into signs. So see how we're starting to get more and more and expect more. So those intervention principles, we may provide many opportunities to use those symbols. We want to do it all day long, and we want to make sure that that it's used throughout the routine and with those highly preferred activities at first, but then even with those not so much. And those new symbols are introduced, but we want to still want to be as responsive and acknowledge any intent at all. Even if it's a refusal, you want to make sure that you acknowledge that and let them know you understand. Excuse me. They may not be able to get out of it, but you do need to let them know, yes, I get that you don't want to do this, but that's the reason I'm the teacher, and it has to be that way. Then the physical access to symbols must be established and maintained. So we want them to know where we keep them. We can't just keep them up on a shelf and then pop them down. We want them where they can access them. Because wouldn't it be cool if that's over there, they go over. I think the coolest thing that ever happened with me, with my deaf-blind student, I've been struggling with getting her to initiate things. And we had her community-based fanny pack, and it was in a cubby hanging on a hook. And one afternoon, it was like a Tuesday. We went on Fridays and Tuesday, and she's going around the room and she finds it. And she holds it and she opens it and everything. And then she brings it over to me and gives it to me. Well, immediately I called up to the principal and said, we'll be right back. I'm taking her out. We drove to my house and checked my mail. But it was a matter of letting her know, yes, you let me know you wanted to do this. The next day she tried to do that again. And it was like, that's a nice try, but we don't go there until Friday. Today's Wednesday. We got 2 more days. So she was able to understand and know that we are going to do this. And yes, I know that you want to go, but we can't do that every day. So it was a really powerful, cool thing to watch her just really feel so empowered by, hey, look at this. I know what this means. And I know if I give it to you, that I'm going to get what I want. Then we have to remember that to use that speech when modeling along, because we don't know what they can hear. We don't know what things that they're going to be using that's going to help bring that message home to them or for them to understand even more. So we may be transitioning into from using gestures into using sign language. And this is something that the partner might do to start those things, we're going to pantomime the movement with the object as part of the activity it represents. So if I've got a cup, I may use an actual cup and pantomime drinking as part of the activity. Then I might pantomime the movement with an object, an identical one, as part of the activity. So I might have two cups that I'm going to use. One is presented with the movement and the other is used during the actual activity. So I have the same thing. And then I'm going to start pantomiming that movement with those. And then I'm going to hopefully start using we're going to have a cup and we're going to drink. And I'm pantomiming that movement of the sign that I want to use for drink. And instead, I'm going to start taking and fading away that object so that we are using this for drink instead of having to have the cup or the hand movement mimicking. So see, it's not quite there. We haven't gotten down. As you see down at the bottom, we've still got some extra steps. I'm not going to do those steps quite yet because they're not ready for it. So I'm not going to use that sign without the object quite at this stage yet, but that's where I'm going. That's where I want to see happen eventually. But at this stage, they're not ready for it yet.
Nancy?
Okay. Yes.
Question.
Okay.
Would you wait for the child to be at this level to begin to apply language to their behaviors, like acknowledging that they are refusing?
Absolutely not. I would be still doing it. I'm going to be modeling all the way through. I want them to know those things. It's my expectation of whether they're going to be giving it back to me that makes the difference. Because I always want to model good behavior. I always want to model good communication. Does that make sense?
That's what I thought. That makes sense.
Perfect. Okay. Then this is the intervention with symbols, using with symbols. Begin with the symbols representing those highly preferred activities or items. And I'm going to have meaningful symbols that go with those meaningful activities. And if they don't indicate understanding of any symbol, then I'm going to select a symbol based on their sensory skills. So I'm going to base it on what they either can hear or vision or touch, and I'm going to pair it with that highly preferred activity. So see, I'm teaching them this means this. I'm not going to dwell on this symbol the whole time, but I'm definitely going to let them know when you feel this, this is when we're going to do it. So it's that almost that anticipation, but I'm modeling it. Once again, I'm doing that modeling, and I'm considering various access methods. So I may be going to touch them. I may want them to touch it. I may want them to look at it. I may want them to hand me the item. So I want them to be looking at different ways that they can do that. And I'm going to be modeling that for them so that they know that that's an option. And I want them to consistently respond to that symbol use. So I'm using that, and I'm still working on it and still I'm teaching them that skill. I'm modeling it. Okay, so now we have a definition of communication here. And communication is the active process of exchanging information and ideas. And communication involves both understanding and expression, so that receptive, that understanding and the receptive. And those forms of expression may include personalized movements or gestures or objects, verbalization, signs, pictures, whatever. Okay, so whatever it is, it can mean that. But now we're getting more into the definition of language, which is what we really are working towards. We're working towards getting these individuals to understand language. And language is a complex and dynamic system of conventional symbols. So see, we've gone from communication And now we really do want them going into more of a language-based approach. And languages that rule govern behavior. So now we really are trying to get them into understanding a more formalized system. And that is developing that language. Okay. So that starts with vocabulary. And we start with personalized vocabulary. Words that are highly motivating and meaningful to the individual. That's where we start. Because isn't that what motivates all of us? That's the way I would want it. You know, I'm going to work a whole lot more for a cup of coffee than I am for other things that have no motivation for me. But a cup of coffee always is highly motivating for me. It's going to include words that the individual would want to say. So we're thinking in terms of if they could talk, what would they say? What would they want to say? Not what we want them to say, but what would they want to say? They might say, this is stinking stupid. Okay, that's what any other kid in middle school would say, right? So we want to, you know, always have that in mind, that inside there is a regular kid. There's just a kid inside there. And it's up to us to give them those words. And sometimes that's more highly motivating if we're able to give them those words that say, this stinks, instead of, I don't want that, you know, or whatever. Then yeah, they're going to be more motivated because it's funny. And they're going to be, oh, wow, that's what other kids would say. Then it can occur several times during the day. We don't want to just pick words that they're only going to use at one time. I hear a lot of times it's like, oh, we're only going to introduce 2 vocabulary words because we don't want to overwhelm. You know, what I think about that is that all throughout the day, things are happening and there's vocabulary associated with those activities that you're doing. And so that vocabulary should fit in and be embedded into those activities. So it should be able to be happen several times during a day. And they're available in their environment, and they're likely to be nouns or really highly preferred activities. Okay, so then we get to core, and I know core is a big deal for a lot of people. It makes up about 80% or more of language used from toddlers through adults, and there are 250 to 400 of the most commonly used vocabulary across environments. So they include those action words like want and put. They're also nouns. There's some pronouns like I, me, mine, and they demonstrate like this and that, or they're demonstrative as in this and that, and they're adverbs like here and there. So those are, you know, there's core vocabulary, but you start with the ones that really are motivating to the individual first. Then we go from that calendar or that anticipation calendar to going into more of a calendar system, which would be that timepiece that help them learn time concepts and vocabulary, what happens during the course of the day, being aware of what's going to happen. So it takes not just the anticipation, but adds more and makes decisions about their schedule. So we may embed choices within that calendar system. We can have conversations in which they look forward to upcoming events, or they can reminisce about their day. When I was teaching, excuse me, I'm so sorry. We would use I taught in Kentucky, and we had a big initiative about writing, that all students had to be writers. And so I had to show that in a portfolio. And one of the ways that we did that was to use our calendar system. By this time, we had a pretty good calendar system, daily calendar going, and we had several times that we could embed choices throughout the day. And so we would go through, and when she came in the morning, the first thing we do was go through her calendar and talk about what was going to happen that day. And if we to make choices through there, we could do that. If we wanted to switch, oh, we want to do this in the morning instead of the afternoon, still got to do it, but you can kind of decide when we do this. So that gives her a little bit of ownership of when she has to do her work. But we also, as then we work through the day and she went through her calendar, we also would talk about it as we were doing each activity. Then at the end of the day, we would always take a few minutes and take our finish box of all the things that we had done that day, and we'd take it out and talk about them again. But then we'd pick 3 items from the day, and I had mass produced all of the object cues, or all of her things that we would use. So what we would do is she would pick 3 of those, and then we would write in her journal about her day, things that she did that day that she liked. And then that journal, which was a huge scrapbook that had all of her little symbol systems in there. So she could take that home and then share it with mom and dad about what she did that day. So that there's 4 opportunities for her to talk about her day when she first came in, while we were doing the activity, at our wrap up, and then again at home with mom and dad. So there are opportunities for her to use that system and learn that language a little bit more. Each one is highly individualized. Each calendar system is individualized and is a time schedule that the individual can understand. Now, what we do want to do is avoid, when we're using calendar systems, limiting the communication to only calendar activities. We want to look at what else is going on through the day and represent. And then doing calendar activities without communication. We always want to add communication when we're doing these activities. Okay, so now we're up to level 6. And in level 6, that's typically developed between 12 and 24 months also. And it's with those gestures and words, but this time we're getting into abstract symbols, such as speech and manual signs. We're going to do those line drawing symbols. We may have multiple meaning pictures, braille, printed words. We're going to use all of those things. And then they're abstract because they don't physically, they're not physically similar to what they represent. So they may not look at all, but it may be the texture or something that represents something in that activity. It's limited in use, but they are used one at a time. Remember, we're still at level 6, so we're only using one at a time. We're not putting multiple symbols together. Okay, so then we're adding that abstract concept in there by this time, we're starting to include those feelings and emotions and letting them know, oh, you're mad. Oh, I get that, or you're frustrated or those kind of things. So we're adding stuff in there. We're adding those more abstract concepts. And we're using abstract symbols as well. And in level 6, it's still intentional. We're still purposefully directing that communication with that intended meaning. And that can also include that eye gaze, where they're gazing at something and looking, all that. Then symbolic with abstract symbols now. But we still don't use those combined symbols. We're still not combining 2 and 3 symbols at one time. That comes in the next level. They may sign the word cracker and use an abstract picture or symbol or an abstract object. So the modes may be single use of abstract symbols. So spoken word, maybe no or finished. They may use manual signs, no, stop. They may use written word, brailled words, abstract 3D symbols or 2D symbols. And they may use different abstract symbols, but not at the same time. So they may, depending on what it is you're using. And then they may be using speech generating devices to select some of those abstract symbols. Okay, so what we want to do is increase that vocabulary and expand their topics. That's what we're really trying to do in level 6, is really get them to where they're understanding those abstract symbols. And it's initially, we're going to explicitly, systematically teach them to learn what those meanings of those words or those symbols are, excuse me, the symbols. We're going to expand those functions of the language to include comments and information exchange. So we want them to be using language in a more expanded way. We want them to start asking and answering questions and using question forms. So the what and why and where, those kind of things. We want them to initiate communication too. We're going to provide many opportunities to use those symbols for meaningful, motivating activities. And then we're going to model with abstract symbols in 2 and 3 symbol utterances. We're modeling that. Remember, we're not expecting them to do it yet. We're just modeling it for them so that they will know what to do when they do get up to level 7. We're going to use speech when modeling, and that's all, or signs or whatever we're going to use. We want to be responsive still, and we want them to have physical access. Okay, so this is where they're starting to combine some of those abstract symbols. And we're going to do that within existing routines. So those ones they already know really well. But we're going to start providing opportunities to use new 2 and 3 symbol utterances. So we're going to try to get them. So if they have a lunch routine and the milk is available, we want them to give us more like milk, drink, and more milk. So we want them to start putting those words together. Instead of before it was just drink or just milk, now we want them to put those and start, we're teaching them how to do that. We're really demonstrating and helping them to combine that and to start making it happen. And we want them to increase those utterances along those different intents. Remember, we want them to use all of those now and start getting really familiar with it. We're moving more into those symbolic communication where we're pairing those symbols with the written word or brailled word or signed words, or maybe a combination of any of those. So we're going to have those labeled. So we may have our symbols, but we're also going to have them labeled. And maybe we're going to start showing them that the brailled word is there along with that. And we're going to start taking those symbols away as they're learning them to see if they can start to use more of a symbol system like that with the printed word or the braille word. We're also going to really increase the activities, the literacy activities. We're going to be doing literacy from level 1 all the way through level 7. I'm highlighting it here in level 6 just because to let you know that we are, sorry, in each one, we're going to be adding those literacy activities because it really does dovetail straight in with communication. Literacy and communication, they happen at the same time. So we're going to be just adding that piece in there so that you understand and connect also with it. We're going to capture the interest of the individual using these experiences, and we're going to write about them and do different things like that with them. We're going to provide those age-appropriate activities, of course, and we're going to have modeling. We're going to model what is expected and how it's supposed to look. We're going to support them as they progress through the levels, and we're going to support movement from concrete to abstract symbols and from single to multi-symbol utterances. And we're going to make that print meaningful. We're really going to start letting them know, wow, this does have meaning. I mean, all these symbols that are up there, that really does mean something. And that's how we're helping make those connections. We're going to expressively use symbols to talk about a story or regulate a reader. We're going to request, maybe they'll request books, or maybe they need help reading the book. A lot of times with our learners with special needs, they haven't had this early literacy that most of us have done with our kids. They haven't necessarily, because other things have happened. Maybe they've spent a lot of time in the NICU, or maybe other things have overridden that just sitting down with a child and reading a book just for that bonding opportunity and that kind of thing. Or even having exposure to holding a book, reading it, turning pages, holding it the right way. All of those things are very much part of literacy. And we have to give our students that exposure and the opportunity, because most of that kind of thing we learned incidentally. We did it very, very early, and nobody really sat down and taught us. Well, now we need to think about these learners and creating those things. So we create and read experience books and social studies, stories, and different things like that will help. Experience books are those short stories of things that they've done. So it's a real life experience. Maybe it's going out to the playground. You can write a book about anything. Going to the lunchroom, taking the attendance to the office. You can, write about concepts, familiar routines, motivating activities, important events like birthdays, or some kind of trip, or even doing experience books for visits to the doctor for the family, so that they will have something that the student will know what's going to happen next through that. There are lots and lots of examples on paths to literacy. There's also a lot of examples on the NCDB literacy, All Children Can Read literacy website. So there's lots of stuff around that. Social stories also help. Social stories are those narratives to illustrate certain situations and problems and how people deal with them. So we might be incorporating some of that into this level with our students, so that they'll know what to do in certain situations and such. Okay, so now we're finally getting to level 7, and that's language. That's where it typically begins around 2 for our typically developing kids. So language is where the symbols, those both concrete and abstract, are combined into 2 and 3 word combinations. So it's that want juice, or me go out, or different things like that we're using according to grammatical rules. And they understand the meaning of the symbol and the combinations that may be different, but they're able to put them together and start figuring out that these things, when we put them together, we're starting to use those 2 and 3 word sentences. So we're really getting there. So we want to expand. There's semantic and syntactic abilities to introduce the symbols for new vocabulary. We're introducing the length of a symbol combination. We're teaching them the language code of the AAC system. Or we may be expanding those functions to include comments or information or initiation for communication, or using question forms. So we're really working on that how and when and why and all that. We're going to introduce or increase the complexity, the hierarchy of symbols. And we're going to start decreasing the hierarchy of prompts. So we're not so much hand under hand and really hands-on with it. We're starting to fade some of those prompts if we're able to. Of course, we're always, if they're deafblind and they need it, we're always going to use tactile sign or whatever if that's needed. So the intervention principles are that provide many opportunities to use those symbols for meaningful and motivating activities. We're going to use those 2 and 3 symbol utterances. So we're really starting to go from those single words to 2 and 3 symbols. And then we're still going to use our speech. We're still going to be responsive, and we're still going to give them physical access to those things, because we want them to be able to use them at all times. When we're building this semantic, those vocabulary skills, we're going to focus the stimulation. We're going to use new vocabulary items frequently in desired activities. So we're going to be expanding that vocabulary and using more. We're going to use explicit vocabulary instruction, that direct instruction, so that they know this word means this. We're going to have that shared reading to expose them to new vocabulary. So I may read it and then I want them to read it back. And so we're really doing that. We're using lots of materials on and lots of different topics of interest. We're getting into print or braille. We're going to really recognize that it's on different things, that different labels mean different things. They're on stop signs, they're on menus when we go in restaurants, their words are everywhere. And we're going to use it, we're going to expose them to multiple places with various people doing, as they're using their vocabulary skills. We want them to really practice is what we're asking them to do. Then we're going to start really looking into grammar at this point, and really building that grammar and focus that into those meaningful activities and the way that grammar is supposed to be written and spoken. And so we're really going to be shoring that up and making sure that they have those skills. So the 5 principles to remember with that, building that the grammar, is to consider the individual's current language skills and select targets that would make the individual's messages clearer or more easily understood. So I want to look at what they're doing and then figure out, how can we make this better? What are the things that need to happen here? And then I'm going to select those, either whether it's word order or tenses, or if they need to use pronouns that they use sometimes, but not always. So I want to make sure that I have found those things that they use, and I really want to make sure that they feel comfortable. It's that fluency piece of it. And then we're going to arrange the environment for a real need for that language structure as you are teaching. So you really want to, maybe I'm going to leave things out so that I'm sabotaging and they have to ask for those things. Maybe I'll give them all the materials except no fork for when they're going to eat. And then they have to really ask me, oh, I need a fork. Oh, that's right. And then I'm going to use their recast, that language correction, instead of her go to she goes, to teach them more that complete utterance. So if they are saying her goes so-and-so, I want to correct that. That's that modeling and stuff. And I'm not going to use telegraphic language. I'm going to use the complete form verbally, even if the AAC mode only allows for just those few words, but I'm going to be giving it first. Okay, so with every one of those foundations, or each one of the levels, and what we've done, at the end of each one of them, we have essential takeaways. So as you're going through the module and you get to the end, there'll be several, like 3 or 4 slides that have the essential takeaways that go with that direct level. But each one at the end always ends with this, which is communication intervention is listening with your eyes and hands and heart to develop the individual's expressive communication skills, and talk more with your mouth to develop the individual's receptive skills. Okay, so with that, do we have any questions? It only took us 3 sessions to get through all this. And I guarantee you there's a bazillion other things in each one of these. So I can't wait till they get out. It comes out.
I have a question.